Hello, welcome to the Beginners Self-Publishing Podcast with me, Jay Artale, and my co-host, Michael Ronn.
Good morning, Jay.
How are you doing today?
I'm great. Just still trying to wake up. It is about 9 o'clock my time, and it was a little bit of a late morning. So how about you?
I'm doing good. It's hot here in Turkey, so just trying to keep cool. So today's show is going to be about cover design, and we're going to be looking at key cover design considerations, but then also we're going to be looking at what your role is as an author. And then we'll look at finding and working with a cover designer. So we've got all sorts of tips and ideas and additional resources that will help you as you're approaching your cover design process. Michael and I usually start off each show by talking about what we're currently working on. So Michael, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, actually, I have something that I finished that's actually very relevant to this month's topic, and that is my very first novel has received a cover makeover. So I got a new cover for my first book, which is How to Be Bad. I have rebranded it, and then I have also retitled it. So the new title of it is called Magic Souls. And when I first bought the book, it was more of a pre-made. And so I didn't really understand the concepts of covers, and I didn't really realize that it was an urban fantasy. And so now I've got an urban fantasy cover that is more narrowly defined, and it makes it very clear that it's an urban fantasy title. So I look forward to talking about that a little bit more. And other than that, I am working on book 3 in my upcoming Lit RPG series. So thick into the writing of that.
Oh, great! You had a busy summer then, by the sounds of it.
Oh, as always, I have to stay busy. If I'm not busy, I'm just sitting in a chair, just staring at the wall. So I have to do something. You know?
I doubt that. I think you run around 900 miles an hour. You live like you write.
Yeah, pretty much. And I've also started law school. So this is, as we record this, has been the first week of that. So that has been a little intense too. So
I bet it has, and it's probably only going to get even more intense as the years go by.
Yeah, but I can handle it. I wouldn't have signed up for it if I couldn't handle it. So, well, how about you? What are you up to?
Well, my poetry collection is getting closer to the finish line, so I've been doing some research to get some ideas of what I want my cover to look like. This is the first time I'm using a bespoke cover designer, which is exciting. And it's for my passion project, so I'm trying to put everything into this one. Even if it doesn't sell one copy, I just want it to look beautiful.
Exactly. And that's great, because poetry collections, the thing about them is you have a lot more latitude, right? Because there's no standard, you can't look at a poetry cover and think, oh, that's a poetry cover, right? So you can create something beautiful, and yeah, that's awesome. You're getting real close.
Right, so let's get started on our topic today, which is ebook cover design. So we're going to start off with some ebook cover design basics. Now, obviously, you have a cover design and you've got your aspect ratio for your ebooks, but you've really got to make sure that you don't underestimate the importance of a thumbnail image. Yeah,
that is important. Thumbnail images are critical, because when you think about it, and I love that you mentioned this first too, because it really does guide your thought process when we're going forward with this, is that when readers first see your book on Amazon, it's going to be a thumbnail, or on Kobo, or on Apple. And so it's really important that it looks clear and that readers can tell what's going on. You've
got to look at the whole gamut of, once you've got your book out there and you've got your cover design, then you're going to do promotion as well. So although you're focused on this stage of looking at a cover design, looking at how you can take bits of it or use the whole thing, and how it will look on a tweet or on a Facebook post or a Facebook ad or wherever your book is going to be featured.
Yeah, and another thing too is you mentioned that is thinking about the marketing, right? And what is marketing? Marketing is making sure that the cover appeals to the right people. So also helping them understand what genre it is at first glance within a split second, and then just making sure that it's narrowly targeted toward those people. So if you're writing space opera, if you're writing a poetry collection, if you're writing a nonfiction self-help book on authors, you just want to make sure that it dials down into that audience. It's so important, but at the same time, there's this balance, right, that you have to make, because you want the book to look amazing, but you also want it to look like the other books that are on the genre. And so there's a balance between standing in and standing out, right?
Mm-hmm. What, for your genre that you write in, what what would you see are some of the key elements on the covers that you have to have if you want to make sure that your books are associated with your genre?
Well, for my space opera series, all I knew is that I wanted to have a spaceship on the cover, and I wanted to have things getting blown up. That, for space opera, it's really that simple. Spaceships somewhere on the cover, you know, and it sometimes helps to keep it that high level. If you're writing an urban fantasy with a heroine protagonist, you know, you just want to have an assertive heroine on the front of the cover, right? They can be pretty, they can be attractive, but they just need to be assertive, and it needs to be clear that it's about a heroine. I think it's easiest to keep it super simple when you're thinking about your genre. So if you're writing fantasy about dragons, have a dragon on the cover. If you're writing an epic fantasy that's like Game of Thrones, you know, have swords or shields or things like that on the cover. I think that it's pretty easy to just dial it down into one big thing that you can have on your cover. And if you can find that, that will help you so much.
There's so many elements, which is why, you know, working with a cover designer is the best option when you're doing an ebook, because they think about that. They think about the balance of the different typographies and, you know, different colors. And, you know, when you're trying to design your own cover, there's just so many different elements that you're trying to do. The best thing really is doing research on Amazon, finding your niche, like Michael says, and doing research and seeing what books stand out and which books kind of appeal to you. When you see a cover that you like, what are those elements that, you know, stand out for you and really appeal to you? And creating a clip file or something, if you use something like Evernote, just taking those images to create a file of all the different design ideas that you like, and whether you're going to design your own covers or whether you're going to get a designer to do it, at least having that idea. But then at some point you need to stop looking and then start focusing on your own cover, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. I use Pinterest to collect covers that I like. It helps a lot because you can send that board to your cover designer. You can send them a link and say, here are all the urban fantasy titles, or here are all the romance titles I like. Make something that looks like this. That has been something that's worked really well for me. But what I would like to talk about is, you talked about the four elements, the core elements of any cover, right? And I think any cover has just a couple of different elements that you want to keep in mind. And I'll go over those real quick. But the foreground, so that's the very front, the focus, the visual focus of the cover. There's the background, which is the background. And then there's the title. And then there is the author name. So when you think about that, you can look at a cover and you can isolate each of those different elements. So if you're looking at, like I was with my book, Magic Souls, urban fantasy, and I wanted something that fit in with the marketplace for urban fantasy, I would look at all the different covers out there, and I would look at the different kinds of heroines that they had in the foreground. I would look at what was going on in the background. So is there city? Is there ocean? Is there forest? Is there, you know, what is it in that's in the background? And then the title, and there's typography and different fonts and things that you see more in certain genres than you do in others. And there's a resource that I'll talk about a little bit later that will help you look at some of that stuff. And once you see that, that'll open your mind. And then the author name. So what does your author name look like? What font is that in? What color is it in? All those things are what give you the subtle clues to what genre the book is in and what genre you want your cover designer to target. So just thought I'd throw that out there, because if you think about those four elements, instead of just looking at a cover and thinking, okay, I like that, and you don't really know why you like it, you can start to break it down and isolate it, and that helps you give better feedback to your designer. And it also, if your designer gets it wrong, or if they send something in and maybe it looks really good, but maybe the title of the book just isn't quite there, it needs a different font, you can give them that specific feedback.
Yeah. Actually, one of the most pinned images I have on Pinterest is a book cover design typography cheat sheet that shows complementary typography that works together. Pinterest,
that sounds amazing.
Yeah, we'll have to include it on the show notes, because it was really good, and it's ones that there's so many fonts out there, and I think that's part of the challenge when you're designing a cover, is there's so much to do. That's why breaking it down into that foreground, background, title, typography is so good, but within each of those 4 core elements, there's so many different directions that you can go. When you're writing your first book, I think that's something that you've got to have in the back of your mind as well, is, okay, if this is book 1 of a series of 4 or 5, will this cover design lend itself to something that I can be the first part of a series?
Mm-hmm. No, that's a great point, because your designer really can't do that. You have to give that instruction to your designer. Your designer doesn't know, meaning unless you tell them it's book 1 of a series, they're not really they're just going to design what you're telling them to design. That leads to another great point, that the author plays a very critical role in this, don't they, Jay?
Yes, I mean, it's a key role, and it's one of the funnest parts. I think lots of people turn their nose up at internal formatting and, you know, distribution, and some people just even don't like doing the marketing promotion, but cover design seems to get everybody excited because it's a really critical element, but it's a fun thing to do. And whether you're doing it yourself or getting a designer to do it, being involved, it's, you know, it's not an abdication of responsibility on the author's part. You really need to get stuck in there, you know, providing information, but also knowing what you want, I think, before you start, whether you're doing it yourself or whether you're working with a cover designer. You've got to do some research. It doesn't matter which route you're going down. You have to go and see what's in your niche. So, you know, you have to know what niche you're writing in. And, you know, it can get a bit complex when your niche and when you're writing, you know, spans a couple of different niches, but there's so much information out there on Amazon, or are there any other sites that you do research for cover design?
If I'm looking up like typographies and things, just looking to see what kind of typographies are out there, Dafont is a good one. That's DAFONT.com. Font Squirrel is another place where you can go to look up fonts and find out what's out there. But those are really the 2 primary tools that you can use. I think you have to be careful not to spend too much time and get stuck in analysis paralysis.
Yeah, no, definitely. So anything else to do with author role?
No, I just think it's important, like you said, it's important not to abdicate your responsibility. But at the same time, it's important not to rule this with an iron fist, because I see authors do one of 2 things. And it's this, what can get them into trouble is, oh, well, I'll just leave it all to my cover designer. It's all good. And then they pick the wrong cover designer and they get a cover that maybe they're not happy with, or maybe it just doesn't quite dial into that sweet spot of the genre. The other side of that is trying to direct the designs too much. So I want a king on the cover, and I want him to be I want him to have glasses, and I want a spaceship above, and I want him to have a fur coat on, and then I want them to be like a castle on the background. You know, at that point, that's just too much. You can't give your designer that much information. You're going to end up with something that just looks like a mess. You're going to confuse your designer, and it's going to make even the best designer probably unlikely to help you. So you have to find that balance, and we can talk a little bit more about that as we move forward. But just the author's role in this is to be more of a guide and a coach rather than a ruler, or, you know, we got to control everything.
Yeah, and I think one of the important things is cover is not set in stone. If you fall out of love with it, then, you know, you can get a new one and just switch it out, and it's really easy to do that. And I see so many authors that, you know, they rebrand themselves, they change the direction of where they're going. That it's not something that you need to be scared to, you know, that you can do. So I think it's really important not to hang back on releasing your book. Choose the best cover that you can at the time, release it, and then if you fall out of love with it a year, 2 years from now, know that you can change it and revamp it, and then there's a good excuse to do some promotion and marketing around it because you got a new cover.
Exactly. And speaking of getting new covers and changing up your covers, why don't we talk about how authors can find cover designers, and how they can start the process if you're listening to this and you've never gone through the process before. Where would an author start?
One of the best ways, and how I got my cover designer, is through referrals. I belong to the ALLi members forum, and in there's people talking about different covers that they had designed, and we run a book cover competition with our book expo Indie Author Fringe, which happens usually around May, June, and seeing book covers there and then finding out who has done those book covers. So kind of referrals, I think, is a great way. When you see a book that really resonates with you and is in your niche, then knowing that that designer can design in that niche and can maybe imagine your aesthetic and put it on a book cover for you. So I think referrals is a really good way. And then also with ALLi, we have our partner members, and we have lots of cover designers that are vetted services that have gone through the watchdog vetting process. So we know that each of the cover designers that is an ALLi partner member delivers up to a specific standard, and that they've got, you know, a code of ethics and they follow that code of ethics. There are lots of people out there that can design your cover for you, but you just have to make sure that you choose the right one. So I think referrals would be my #1 tip.
I agree. If it's possible, and if you can find a designer within your budget that has experience doing the genre that you're doing, that's always going to be the best. Like, for example, there's a space opera cover designer who everyone uses, who is considered to be one of the best. You can use a cover from him and you can afford that, that's fantastic. If you can't, then, you know, ask around and find the best designer that works within your budget.
Have you found that when you look at books, when you do the, you know, look inside a book on Amazon, that it mentions cover designers in there? So if we did research on Amazon and we found a book cover we liked, whether it would show up as cover design by X person? I'm not sure if
no, generally no. Every once in a while, you'll see someone who will give attribution to their cover designer, and I'm not really sure why that is. Maybe the cover designer asked for that, or maybe they were being generous, but typically you can find it. It's kind of best practice. Most indie authors, I should say, most indie authors will list whoever their cover designer is somewhere within the front matter of the book. So if you go to the look inside sample, on the copyright page, usually you'll see who edited the book and then who did the cover design. If you can't find it there, then I would just reach out to the author and ask them. And most people are more than happy and receptive and love to share who their cover designer is.
Yeah, because I know when you upload your book to KDP, there's a section that allows you to add who your editor is, so you can give them, you know, credit for them. But I don't think they have that for cover design, which is a bit odd, isn't it? Such a key part.
Yeah, you can do it for illustrators, I think, because I've seen some book covers where it was like an illustrator that did the cover, and then they'll give credit to their illustrator because maybe there's some contractual agreement to do it. Yeah, but I don't think there's a section for cover design, though, which there should be.
There should be, yeah. It's such a critical part of the book. It's the first thing I know when I'm looking down, say the top 20 books. I'll click on before I read the text. I see an image, and that's what attracts me. Yeah,
definitely. And another area that you can find designers on, because we've talked about referrals, and I think that's the method that you and I both would recommend first. But if you can't find if you don't have friends or friends that can give you a referral, then the next thing you can do, I shouldn't say you don't have friends, but if you don't have, sometimes if you're venturing into a new genre, you know, you may not have anyone that you can lean on that has experience in that genre. And so you can go to designer websites. So I'll list a couple of these. Just know that these change regularly. So depending on when you're listening to this, you may just have to do a Google search. But there are a lot of freelancing websites out there that will allow you to look for designers specifically. So 99 Designs is one where it's more of a crowdsource, where you can list the details of your project, and then you have different designers bid on you know, working with you, and you can choose from, you know, a myriad designs, just a lot of different designs. So that's a great tool if you're not quite sure what you're looking for, or if you maybe want to have some different choices. Upwork is another choice that allows you to hire freelancers. I used Upwork quite a bit in the beginning of my career just to find good, reputable editors, and that's a good tool that you can use as well. But those tools, you know, those are for freelancers, and you will have to work with them and negotiate on the price and all the things that go along with with hiring freelancers, but they can be a very effective tool for finding a cover designer. Have you ever used any of those, Jay?
When I did my first travel guide, I designed it myself. I thought it looked fab. It really didn't. And so when I wrote my second travel guide, I went to 99 Designs. And I really love that process because you fill in a little template of some concept ideas and any critical elements that you want on your ebook cover. And then you get pitched. I got about 80 freelancers that pitched ideas, and at that point you haven't committed to anything. And then what you do is you choose a short list that you want to work with, and you maybe choose like 3 or 4, and then you provide them feedback of, say, hey, could you make one tweak or one edit? And they'll do a second round, and then once they've done that second round, and then you choose your designer that you want to work with, and then you go forward with them. And then it worked out really well, and he was great to work with. I think lots of authors, when they're designing their own covers, think they're doing a great job. But then as soon as you have a cover designed by a professional, oh my God, it's amazing.
Yeah, you just want to crawl into a corner and cry,
Yeah.
because they're that much better.
First book out, selling. I mean, it sold, but it was the only book in its niche. And so people had to buy it if they wanted to know about this area, because there was no other travel guide. So I think I lucked out on that. But then when I started trying to build a line look and a whole theme around this series, I realized how bad they were. So I'm so glad that I invested in it. And I think when you're a beginning author, one of the key things that you have to remember is you're in this for the long haul. So, a cover design may be costing you a few £100 or $300 or $400, but that's a long-term investment for the life of your book. So,
Yep.
Don't think of it as something that, oh, this is a big amount of money. You're gonna, if you have a great cover, it's gonna look great on Amazon, on any of the other distribution sites. It's gonna look fabulous on Twitter, on Facebook. It's gonna attract attention. That's your shop window for your book, is your cover. So it has to look good, and there's so many indie authors out there right now, and there's so many covers. There's so much online activity around books that your cover has to stand out as a quality book cover.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, a good cover, that's the price of the ticket. I mean, if you don't have that, you can't even get into the stadium. I mean, you can't play the game if you don't have a good cover by a good designer. And there are authors out there that can design their good covers. They're few and far between, but there are some out there that can do it. But yeah, a good cover is absolutely essential. And like you said, it's an investment. You're in it for the long haul. And while it may hurt a little bit today, you'll be so glad that you did it 3-4 years from now.
Yeah. And one of the other options, we had the Indie Author Fringe event on June 3rd, and that was all around selling your book. And one of the sponsors, one of the session sponsors, was the Book Design Templates. And I know they're not the only company out there, but it's websites that have book templates with the image and your license to use the image and everything, and you just drop your text in. So it has the font already formatted, and you just type in your text, and then hey ho, you've got a cover. And that's a cheaper option than working with a bespoke cover designer that's going to start your book from scratch. So that's a really good option as well if you don't have a lot of money. And also, especially on book design templates, and it's probably the same on all these other sites, you can filter by niche. So it shows you templates that have been specifically designed for your niche.
No, exactly. In fact, Magic Souls, the book that I was talking about that I rebranded, my first book, the first book actually had a pre-made cover. And I had gotten that cover, and it was nice. It looked great, but it didn't dial into the genre. But there were so many other probably more genre appropriate covers at that time that I could have picked, because the designers do a really good job of designing. Okay, I'm going to design this urban fantasy pre-made cover. I'm going to design this other genre pre-made cover. And so you can definitely use that filter and make sure you grab pre-mades that are in your genre, and that'll make the heavy lifting a lot easier for you.
So when it comes to working with the designer, I remember in the last session we gave some tips around how to work with your editor. And let's cover, what are some of the key things that are important when you've worked with a designer in the past?
Yeah, well, I have, at this time about 34 books. If I could give any advice to anybody that's wanting to know what the number one tip would be, it would be hire the right person. If you don't hire the right designer, you're going to have to do it all over again. The right designer is so important. And when I talked about isolating those different elements, the different elements of covers, when you're looking at designers, grade them based on those 4 different elements. How do their foregrounds look? How does their typography typically look? Is it genre appropriate? Is it, if you pick the right designer with the right experience and the right enthusiasm for your project, that will just make the process so much smoother. And yeah, that's my number one piece of advice.
And actually, if you go and visit our blog, there's a blog post that was how to build a great relationship between yourself and your cover designer. So we'll post that on the show notes, so that can look at some of the key elements that you need to do when you want to build that long-term working relationship. So have you used the same cover designer on groups of your books, or do you kind of hop around different designers?
It depends on the genre. So I have, for my space opera, I use one designer for the whole series. She also did some work for me on my dark fantasy, but I've probably used probably 6 or 7 different designers, and they've all had different skill levels. Some of them were fantastic. Some of them were less than fantastic. Others, we had some contract disputes and things like that. So you just have to find the right person. And I think that really just goes into looking at their work and just making sure that you would feel comfortable handing this over to whoever it is that you ultimately pick. And I think also finding the right balance with what you can afford versus the cover designer's talent level too. Yeah, and it's also trusting the designer's judgment, right? When you get that design and it's not the design that maybe you thought it would have been, to trust their judgment, still give feedback and guidance, but just know that you pick that person for a reason, right? Especially if they have experience in the genre, and you want to trust that. If you find that you can't relinquish that control, then I would challenge that maybe you hired the wrong person, right? So you have to be able to trust what they give you, and that all of it stems from hiring the right people.
Yes, and that's a key part of being an indie author, isn't it? Surrounding yourself with the right team of people, whether it's an editor or a proofreader or cover designer, or whether you've got somebody doing your internal formatting. If you're going to exert that much control over the process, you're never going to get a good team working together.
Exactly. And it comes into leadership, right? Being a leader, you're the captain of your ship. And so you can't operate every different component and different area of the ship. You have to set the guidance and the strategy and the vision, and the rest of your team members help get you there. And yeah, those are the basics of cover design and finding and working with the designer. We'll be talking about designing your own cover in a future episode. We'll cut it off there, but this just suffice to say, this is a really big topic that we could probably spend many hours talking about. Wouldn't you agree, Jay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I personally, I love this topic, and I really could talk about it all night, but we'll go ahead and wrap it up for this month. So our question for the month is, we want to hear from you guys. We've talked about this for a good probably 30, 45 minutes, and we want to hear from you. How did you find your cover designer? You can drop us a comment on the show summary page at www.selfpublishingadvice.org. And if enough people comment, you'll also be able to see how others do it and how others have found their cover designers, which we feel is always a helpful learning opportunity for you. So our topic for next month is going to be getting ready for NaNoWriMo. It's hard to believe it's almost November already, but we're going to devote the October episode to helping you get ready for it, giving you some tips and strategies. And if for those of you who've never heard of NaNoWriMo, this would be a great opportunity to learn more about it and how it can really supercharge your writing career. And we're going to help prepare you to get ready for it, and also how to keep your writing going during the holidays, because for those of us who are listening, the holidays are coming fast, and before you know it, you're going to blink and we're going to be in November and December. And so we're going to give you some tips on how to keep the writing going and how to keep the spirit alive. So as always, if you've enjoyed this episode, we encourage you to leave a review on your podcast network of choice, as that helps us find more great listeners like you, and it also helps the other shows on our network. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next month. Happy writing, Jay.
Happy writing to you too. Okay, bye. Speak to you next month.